Hello, my name is Toni Zeik, and this is my presentation on individual quality tools. It will focus on questionnaires and surveys. This is for St. Mary's University of Minnesota, Schools of Graduate and Professional Programs. The course name is PRM 613, Quality and Integration Management. Okay, so let's go over the agenda. First, we're going to analyze the tool. I'll give you a description of what the tool is, and then we'll go over the inputs, outputs, advantages, and disadvantages of the tool. After that, we'll talk about some alternative tools that you can use. And then we're going to talk about applying the tool, and this is where you're going to get your step-by-steps on how to use it. And finally, we're going to finish with an example, which is going to involve our case study from class. So let's get started analyzing questionnaires and surveys. So what is it exactly? What is this tool that will help us with quality? Well, I know all of you have actually read your textbooks this semester, right? Yeah. No. Okay, so those of you that didn't read it, what it is, it's a data gathering tool. It's a written set of questions designed to quickly accumulate information from a large number of respondents. According to PMI, you should use it if there's varied audiences, geographically dispersed audiences, and if statistical analysis is appropriate. Another way to use it is to gather customer satisfaction post-project and to identify defects and improve the quality in the future. Coming from a quality control background, we would call this a reactive control if you're using it after the project or after a product is already completed. If you want to use it beforehand, I mean, there are other proactive tools you can use. So continuing on, we'll look at what the inputs would be for this quality tool. You'd probably want to look at your quality management plan, lessons learned, quality metrics, tests and evaluation documents, deliverables, approved change requests, work performance data, and your EEFs and OPAs. All of these items can help you gather information to develop your questionnaires and surveys. They may not be required, so obviously you're going to have to tailor it to your project. Once you're complete with your questionnaire, you're going to have a bunch of outputs. So what does that look like? You might have updates to your quality control measures and your varied deliverables. Work performance information will probably come out of it. You might end up with some change requests if you see that, hey, we need to improve quality. We see there's some gaps, and you're going to have to submit those change requests. You might also have to update your quality management plan. Maybe you're missing something, and it could result in updates to project documents such as issue logs, your lessons learned, your risk register, and test and evaluation documents. So looking at the advantages and disadvantages of questionnaires and surveys, a couple of the advantages is it's going to have really quick turnaround, provided everybody gives you a response by your due date. If you have a cutoff period, you might have to just leave some people out if they don't turn it in on time. That'll affect your sampling. We'll get to that later. They're also very practical and obviously cost effective. It also is going to give you large amounts of information that you can quantify and use for analysis. And typically it's cost effective. Some of the disadvantages would be questions are subject to an individual's interpretations. So one person might read a question and interpret manager as their direct manager maybe. Otherwise somebody could read it and say, well, maybe they're talking about a different management group like the board or something. So it really depends on how the individual is going to interpret that question, and that can actually affect the responses. The next thing I'm going to mention is emotions. If you're a manager and you're sending out a survey about your management performance and that person is having a bad day, your scores might be low. If they're having a fantastic day, your scores might be high. So emotions, even though we like to think we're in control of them, can sometimes affect our responses to these surveys. There is also a potential for unconscious bias when developing the questions. And that would be, maybe we have an agenda that we set out, setting up the questions. You could leave some out that maybe somebody else thought, hey, we should have had these in there. And it's almost like you're leading the results. So that's something you really have to be careful for when you're developing these, because that can become a huge disadvantage to you and everyone else taking the survey. The last disadvantage, you may not be inclusive of all the information needed. We also kind of discussed that when we talked about the bias. Moving on to alternative tools. Some of the alternative tools for data gathering would be interviews, checklists, check sheets, and statistical sampling. Some of these, I feel like they almost go hand in hand. So if you did a questionnaire, sometimes people will actually follow up with an interview just to clarify. So you'd have this qualitative information with this quantitative information. And checklists sometimes can become questionnaires, it seems. The other thing you can do is have your check sheets. That one actually is the one that could be more like a checklist. Could be more like a questionnaire or survey. And the statistical sampling, that would be done basically after you're done with your questionnaire. All of these, they're very similar. They kind of can play into each other, I feel. So that's another thing to look out for. Okay, now we're going to apply the questionnaires and surveys. So applying questionnaire and surveys, if you've read your textbook, again, I know you all have, your 10 steps to developing a survey are listed below. First, we're going to start with clarifying the purpose. The purpose is basically your scope of your survey. It's going to help keep you reeled in on what your questions should focus on. The next part is defining your targeted population. When you do this, for example, if you wanted to do a survey and your targeted population was teenagers, you're really going to have to be specific. Like, are you looking at teenagers 13 to 18? Or are you just focusing on, maybe 13 to 16? So you're going to want to clarify that. Another thing is, maybe your survey involves cell phones. Well, you're only doing like a subgroup of that population of teenagers, really, because not every teenager is going to own a phone. And then the next part, you're going to want to talk about your timing and the type of survey as well. So what kind of survey is it? What type? Is it written? Is it from an app? Are you sending an email? Is it a robocall? The other thing for timing, you're going to talk about, okay, is it a week? Is it a month? Is it a day? Is it a year? How long was the survey? And then the next piece, you're going to want to design and introduce, do your introduction, with ethics in mind. So for institutions and groups that are federally regulated, they're required to have this cover letter where they talk about that purpose, the target population, how they're going to use the results, whether it's confidential, anonymous, all that good information. And we'll dig a little bit more into that as we do the example for the case study for this course. Next, you're going to want to formulate your questions. So keeping that scope in mind, keeping those inputs in mind, your lessons learned, your risks, maybe all that good stuff that we talked about earlier to develop those questions. After that, you're going to want to select your samples. So let's say you're focusing on teenagers out of school and you go give this survey. Okay, everybody in the class responds. You got like 40 kids. You enter all of their information into Excel, and it's a lot of information. You don't have a lot of time. You got to pick your samples. So you might want to use Excel has some options for stratifying. You can add a second column, randomize that column of numbers, and then select the every fifth sample, right? So it's really random. The other thing to consider, I was going to mention it. I really wanted to mention it. Oh, yes. The Institute of Internal Auditors. So they, I believe on their website, you can Google it. Everything's on Google, right? Institute of Internal Auditors, they have a very specific methodology for how to pick samples. We're actually required to use it at work, and it really does make it very random. So that's another good way to do it. And you also want to, when you pick your samples, I would suggest writing it down, your methodology on how you picked them, because if somebody comes back and asks you, you want to have that information for them. Next, you're going to carry out your survey. So give it out. If you're going to that school, hand them the stuff, let them fill it out. If you're in a park, just get it done. Carry out the survey. Next, you're going to want to follow up. So if you mailed out your survey or maybe emailed it out, you're going to want to follow up with those people, and maybe in a week, a month, set a reminder so that you get those results back. The next piece, you're going to organize and analyze the data. And that kind of makes sense, right? We took all this information, and what are we going to do with it? We're gonna get your numbers. You're going to do your mean, median, and mode. You're going to look at any trends that you see. And then finally, the last piece, you're going to draw conclusions from that analyzing and those, trends and everything like that. And you're going to write down what's most common and what you're seeing, because these are going to be your results. That concludes the 10 steps for developing your survey. So I'd like to give you guys an example of the tool being used in academic literature. This is actually the conclusions piece. So this is what you get out of step 10. And the article that I picked up, it's the use of alternative medicine for cancer and its impact on survival. And the reason I picked this one is because it hits home for me. I'm a cancer survivor. I had cancer last year. And my dad was actually diagnosed with cancer this year, so it's on my brain today. So this is the one I picked. But looking at this this article, like I said, this is step 10, right? And we can see here that they identified 281 patients with non-metastatic types of cancer, and they list the cancer. They're very specific, right, on what they're looking at, the purpose and everything like that. And then they also define, conventional treatments. Right here, you're talking about your chemotherapy, radiation, your surgery, and your hormones. So again, they're being very specific about what is the purpose of the study, what are we focusing on. They also give their full conclusion at the end. So again, that's number 10. They say that although rare, alternative medicine utilization for curable cancer without any of these conventional cancer treatments, it's going to be associated with greater risk of death. So some of the things to point out in here, when they're talking about their sampling, back over here they said they identified 281 patients. They don't talk about the full number of participants or patients, and it's like, how do we know what the numbers are? Maybe this number is actually really low, or maybe it's really high. we just don't know without all that information. So again, when you're going through those 10 steps, break down how you did your methodology for sampling and then incorporate that in your results. Okay, so now we're going to apply the 10 steps that we just discussed from your textbook to an actual example, and it's going to be the Acme case study that we're using for this course. So my team's project is a pet walk, and just to kind of paint a picture for you, this pet walk is going to be a setup course where people can bring their dogs, they'll walk, they'll socialize, maybe be like a mile or something. We want to encourage people to be healthy, to have healthy pets, so obviously getting exercise is important. There's going to be some vets there and some other pet stores, so there will be some like connections made and people can advertise their stuff as well. There will probably be some food trucks, we got to have some food, right? And then maybe some fun, kiddie pool set up for the dogs to play in because it might be hot out or something. And then there's going to be like a first aid area. So that hopefully paints a picture of what this little socialized event is going to be. So the purpose of the questionnaire is to determine how successful this pet walk is. And we're going to provide it to all of those people who attend. So it's going to be the staff, it's going to be, some of the vendors, it's going to go out to customers, just anybody who shows up. So again, the questions for this survey will focus on, your quality of your event. And then we're also going to talk about the staff performance. I just grossed out. And then we're going to talk about the safety in the questionnaire, because those are the areas that maybe we want to focus on because we want to improve them next year if they really don't turn out that good. So the next step, we're going to define that target population. I kind of already did that in the previous slide. The target population consists of anyone who attended the event. So this is going to be your customers, your staff, and your vendors. Even checking in with your vendors is a good idea just because maybe they didn't like it, maybe they're not going to come back, right? And maybe people like that vendor, so you want to make sure that even the vendors are happy because they could be considered customers as well. So the third step, you're going to choose the type and timing of your survey. For this project, for example, we're going to use an app. We're going to set up an app for people to download and they can fill it out at their leisure. But there's a problem with that, right? Not everyone's going to have a phone. Maybe there's a family, 2 people only have a phone. It's the parents and the kids don't have it, but maybe the kids want to participate. So in order to not exclude anyone, we're also going to have a written type of questionnaire survey, and we're going to give that out to people as well. And maybe we'll have them send it in, or they could drop it off on their way out as they leave the event. You want to give them some options so that the greatest number of people, right, have a chance to fill it out so it's fair. Let's see if I missed anything. I don't think so, so we'll move on. Step 4. Okay, we're going to design the introduction, keeping ethics in mind, right? So since Acme is a large company, we want to develop that cover letter I talked about earlier, and we want participants to maybe acknowledge it. So on that app, we're going to have a push for that. You've seen it, right? You're signing your life away. I'm going to fill this out, so here, you got to acknowledge that you read this, and you didn't, but it's there. So we're going to have that maybe. And on the paper ones, you might want to have a cover sheet, and it's on there. And what is this cover sheet going to talk about? So we're going to talk about the purpose of the survey. We already discussed that in the last couple slides. And then we're going to talk about how the data will be used. So you want to inform that person, that participant, like, what are we going to use this for? We're going to use it for maybe marketing, or we're going to use it for, like this example, to improve quality. We have to let them know what this survey is going to be used for. The next thing you're going to have to tell them, is it confidential? Are we going to share this information with anybody, right? We've seen those as well. give out your phone number, and the next thing you know, you got like 10 people calling you because they shared your number and you signed your life away to agree to that. So we have to talk about that as well. The next part, participation is appreciated but not required. So you can't force people, obviously, to take this survey. It has to be optional, and you have to let them know they have that option. So the next piece is the researcher's contact information. So if somebody has questions about this, you have to provide that information on that cover letter. So pick that lucky designated person who's going to get all those phone calls, emails, and questions. The fifth step is formulating those questions. So as we talked about, using those inputs, you're going to want to kind of focus these questions around your purpose, around your scope. So for this example, I do have a couple on here that I created, and I tried to keep it really simple. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how much did you enjoy the event, right? If they did not like it, we're going to say 1. If they loved it, they're going to say 5. So going down, it's the same thing. How likely are you to return to the event? How likely are you to recommend this event to a friend? How safe did you feel at this event? So, right, trying to keep those questions around those categories we discussed earlier. So step 6, select the sample. And for this one, let's say we're all done. We sent it out. Everybody filled everything out. And now we have 200 participants. Oh, yay, that was such a great number. It's a lot. So we're going to have to deal with that. So what do we do? I will show you how I did it, but we'll say that we're going to select the 5th survey in every pile, right? So if we were to do this, we'd end up having 40 samples by the end. So we're going to carry out that survey, right? We're going to send it out, have the participants take it on their own time, and then follow up, you know, make sure that they are giving you back the response through email or however you administered it. If they're there in front of you, might be your only chance. Don't harass them as they walk away. So here's that example that I created where I put everything in here. I can't fit it all on here, so it only got to number 13, but if we had 40, let's say that's the number we ended up with after we did the 5th out of the pile, okay? So we have questions 1, 2, 3, 4, and everybody's responses are listed on here. We put it in a nice orderly way so that we can actually analyze this data. So what happens when we analyze the data? Well, I kept it really simple again, just did mean, median, and mode for each question. So as you can see, I used Excel to just basically populate those numbers for us, make it easy peasy. So now here's the fun part. We're going to draw our conclusions at the end. So going back to what our questions were, so how much did you enjoy the event? So for question 1, remember our mean, median, mode, we got basically about a 4, okay? For all of them, we got a 4. 4 means, well, extremely likely. Okay, great. So they really enjoyed the event, okay? That's pretty good. Now we can compare it maybe to last year's. So maybe we want to improve it. Maybe 4 is not acceptable. Maybe next year we want to do 5. So we're going to have to maybe ask other questions about, you know, how much did you enjoy the event? Or what did you enjoy most? Maybe we should ask that. The next piece, how likely are you to return to the event? Well, looks like we got a 3, right? Going back to that mean, median, and mode. Looks like everything was kind of consistently a 3. So we're right in the middle. Well, that might be an area we want to improve. So maybe we should have asked other questions, or we could have asked other questions about, you know, what would make you return or something like that. If we followed up with interviews, you know, did another survey or something. So next question, how likely are you to recommend the event to a friend? Again, we can see that everything was kind of consistently a 3, so it might be another area we want to work on and improve quality. and figure out why. That's another, again, why. So the next question, how safe did you feel at the event? My work package that I'm supposed to be working on for this course, actually I focused on safety. So that's why this question was in here. And it looks like we got a 4. People felt really safe at the event. So that's another good thing. And if we wanted to, we could ask even more probing questions to get a better understanding of why they felt safe. So just to recap everything, we talked about analyzing the tool, which included a description. We went over the inputs, outputs, advantages and disadvantages. And then we talked about alternative tools. That was your interviews, your checklists, your check sheets, and stuff like that. So the last piece that we talked about was applying the tool. That was going over the 10 steps from the textbook, okay? We also went over that example, the cancer example, so you could see kind of where it was used and what their results looked like. The last piece was the example. We applied it to the Acme case study and walked through all 10 steps. So that should hopefully give you guys a good idea of how to use this tool and some other important tips and tidbits that will make it easier for you to use. So this concludes the presentation. I want to thank you guys for listening. And I also, it says in the cover letter, right, leave your information to contact. So if you have questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me if you want any help or anything like that. And the last piece, I'd like to leave you with my references that I used for this presentation. So thank you all again. Hope you enjoyed it.